welcome everyone, and thank you for joining me today. And I'm honored to be with you. So what I would like to start with is just sharing with you how our time together is going to unfold in the next 30 minutes. We're going to be setting an intention, which is why I asked all of you to bring a small object like a stone or something of that nature. Then I'm going to share with you my story, the why behind my writing a novel that has to do with jealousy and creating workshops for women that have to do with jealousy. And then I'm going to introduce you to 3 tools that help me move through this ferocious emotion. And I like to call that heart weaving, using those tools. And then I am going to share resources with you. So if you decide after our time together today that you want to take a deeper dive, you'll be able to do that. And then we'll have some time at the end for some questions, which you can put in the chat. So what I'd like to do right now is have you take that object, whatever you brought with you. I have a stone, one of my favorites, and I'd like you to just hold it in your hand and think for a moment about what brought you to the workshop today. Why did you show up? And what is something that you would like to take away with you? So jealousy is an emotion that rarely sees the light of day in terms of conversation. And why is that? Because it brings up feelings like shame and humiliation, embarrassment, and vulnerability. But what I'd like to do today is I would like to have you shift your perspective for a moment about jealousy. And I would like you to think about jealousy as a visitor in your life, if she has showed up, and that she is carrying a message for you. And at that point, there is a 13th century Persian poet and mystic who is a favorite of mine, Rumi, and he wrote this poem. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and attend them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. So, a little bit about my story. And I'd like to make it very clear before I tell you my story that I am not at all into parent bashing or the blame game or feeling like a victim. I do not feel like a victim at all. So what I hold the belief that we all come here to Earth School to learn certain lessons. And our best teachers are those that are closest to us, our parents, our children, our partners. And my parents were tremendous teachers for me. My dad was a very handsome, gregarious, kind of flirtatious guy who traveled all over the world for his work. My mom, a beautiful woman, who, by the way, is going to be 100 tomorrow, so happy birthday, Mom. And she also was insecure, and part of that was due to my father's indiscretions. She also was raising 4 children, one who had a very high maintenance disease. So my parents were fairly emotionally distracted, and that left me with what I call a little hole in my heart and a feeling of not being enough. Now, I think for many of us, the origin of jealousy stems from a feeling of not being enough. So if you are looking for the origin of your jealousy, it may or may not reveal itself to you. If you are spending any time in therapy, perhaps it will come up then. But what I want you to understand that the why behind the emotion of jealousy is important. It's the what. It's what you do with jealousy once you realize it's a visitor in your life. And so what happened to me was jealousy manifested in my life during my marriage to my current husband of almost 30 years. Mark is a rather warm, engaging, attentive listener. All my friends love him, and he loves all my friends. In fact, in the days when we used to have landlines and the phone would ring, and Mark would be on the phone for 15 minutes, and then he'd hand the phone to me and say, "Oh, honey, it's Tracy." And because my friends absolutely love talking with Mark. Well, situations like that, and perhaps a visit from one of my two beautiful sisters, or one of my best friends calling and saying, "I need Mark to come over and fix my car," or a really cute carpenter showing up on his restoration site. All of those things created the appearance of what Shakespeare likes to call the green-eyed monster. And so I quickly realized that it was a very destructive emotion in my life, and it was wreaking havoc on friendships and my marriage. And I knew that I had to get to work. And I knew that no one could do this for me. Not my husband, not my friends, not a therapist. This was an inside job. And so I began the journey. And on that journey, I came into contact with some very, very wonderful teachers. And I'm going to share 3 of those with you today. I'm going to share 3 tools that were very, very transformative for me and helped me to move through this emotion. So I would like to, okay, there we go. Okay, so jealousy can be founded on fear. So let's talk about fear for a second. There are 3 acronyms for fear. And one is, you know what? I think, I'm so sorry. I think I did not share my screen correctly. Forgive me. So there's 3 acronyms for fear that I love. False evidence appearing real, forget everything and run, face everything and rise. So today, what we are about is facing everything and rising. And so these are the tools that help me do that. So the first tool I want to share with you is resiliency. And resiliency is about self-regulation. And 2 women who were psychotherapists out in California after the tsunami developed this tool to help people self-regulate. But they also realized that people just in ordinary life have a series of mini traumas going on. And so they developed CRM, the Community Resiliency Model. And that is based, again, on self-regulation. Now, we all have a band of resiliency. So those of us that grew up in fairly healthy, high-functioning families have a nice wide band of resiliency, which means that they can stay in the resilient zone on a nice even keel. People that grew up in situations where there was domestic violence, conflict, addiction, abuse, have a much more narrow band of resiliency. So they get dysregulated a little more frequently, and they get bounced out of what we call that resilient zone. And so The idea behind resiliency is to teach you how to self-soothe and self-regulate. So I'm going to give you just a quick little neurology lesson. So this is the brain. And when something triggers an emotion like jealousy, your amygdala, your smoke alarm goes off. And it goes off with either real or imagined danger. Imagined danger being false evidence appearing real. As soon as that amygdala, which is in your mid to lower brain, goes off, then your prefrontal cortex, which is where you make rational decisions and choices, goes completely offline. And now you're functioning in the lower region of the brain. You're functioning in the area of fight and flight. And that's when we make bad choices, say things we wish we hadn't, regrets, and we're reacting, we're not responding to the situation, which often happens when we get jealous. So the idea is to get that prefrontal cortex back online. And so resiliency has several techniques. I am just going to introduce you to one of those techniques right now, and that's grounding. What is grounding? Grounding is essentially your body coming in contact with a surface. So you can do it right now. You can feel your feet on the ground, coming in contact with the earth or the floor. You can feel the back of your legs and your buttocks on the back of the chair, on the bottom of the chair. You can feel your shoulders and your back against the chair. So you're grounding yourself. Now, what's really important is that our body has a language of sensation. So how do you know when that smoke alarm, the amygdala in your brain, is going off? You have a sensation in your body. Now, you feel it in different places. I feel it between my navel and my sternum, and I call that my corridor of fear. And I feel like a churning and a fluttering in that area. And as soon as that happens, I know, oh my gosh, I'm about to go offline. And so that's when I start to use the resiliency technique and I start to ground myself. And then, of course, I start to become more conscious of my breath again, because when we are frightened, we hold our breath. And so many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with mindfulness practices like yoga, meditation, conscious breathing. And so you know what I'm talking about when I say you're grounding yourself. The second tool is presence. So I'm sure you've heard things like be here now and those kinds of expressions. So let's just set up a scenario. You and your most beloved are at an outdoor event, maybe it's a barbecue, and that person happens to connect with somebody, they're having a lively conversation, and you find that person threatening, attractive, and you become uncomfortable. So at this point, now you've used your resiliency and your grounding, but we want you to come back to yourself as fully as possible and be in the present moment. So you can use your 5 senses. So perhaps you look up, there's a beautiful blue sky. Maybe somebody's wearing a gorgeous fuchsia colored sweater. Maybe you hear some wonderful music playing. Maybe you touch the fabric of something you're wearing, or you feel a breeze brush across your cheek. If you might smell the barbecue, and perhaps you have a glass of water nearby, and you can take that glass of water and you can have a sip and feel it going down your throat. So you've used your 5 senses to stay present in the moment. Why do we need to stay present? Eckhart Tolle talks about what you resist will persist. Our normal reaction to fear, jealousy, is to tighten and contract and hold. And Eckhart Tolle talks about that is what forms the pain body within us. And he says that situations from the past that we chose not to respond to because we were uncomfortable, because they were painful, difficult. They lodge themselves inside of us and they form the pain body. Now, I'm not saying there aren't situations where a person is physically violated and they do have to disassociate. We're not talking about that. We're talking about an emotional fear that's really a false evidence appearing real. So now you are back in yourself. And the third tool that I want to talk to you about is integration. And integration was developed by Michael Brown, a South African man who wrote The Presence Process. And what Michael Brown is talking about is allowing, embracing, and creating space for the emotion, which seems counterintuitive because we're used to closing in. But he's saying if you give it space, it will eventually dissolve and find its resting place. It's not going to lodge inside of you. It's not going to form what I call stones in the belly. And one of the things that Michael Brown talks about is when a fear arises, an emotion like jealousy, what you can do is you can almost, if you're a visual person, you can envision yourself just holding a small child and comforting that child and saying, hey, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying. It's okay. And you would be amazed at how that emotion loses its power. If you've ever seen a child in a situation like a supermarket and they throw a temper tantrum, and the tighter and more controlling the parent becomes, the bigger the tantrum. And so basically, by allowing and accepting, you are removing the power and you are allowing that imprint to dissolve so it does not get triggered every time an incident occurs that reminds you of whatever formed that imprint. So those tools have been absolutely transformational in my life, and you would be surprised at how natural it becomes when it becomes a regular practice. Jealousy really came as a visitor, disguised as an enemy for me, and really turned out to be a friend. I actually got to the point where one year it was my husband's birthday, and I decided to have a surprise party of all my women friends, just my women friends, and I called it an opening the heart party because I was feeling so appreciative that I had gotten to a point where wonderful, beautiful, talented, gifted friends were not something that were threatening to me. The other thing is my husband chose the path of shamanism, and it took him around the country and to South America, and 95% of the participants are women, and I am now able to be gracious and inquisitive about his adventures rather than frightened and shut down. So this work can be done, and I would say that it takes an emotional warrior to do the work. And what's most important is that you treat yourself with unbelievable kindness on this journey. And remember that we all have a window of tolerance. And a window of tolerance means that when we step outside of our comfort zone, we have to know how far to go so that we are stretching ourselves, but not go too far too fast. Now I would like to share some of the resources with you that you can take along if you decide that you'd like to continue the work. And of course, if you have any questions that you want to put into the chat group, you can do that. So here are some sources. The Presence Process, the book by Michael Brown, I sort of think about that as almost my Bible. I've read it 4 times. Michael has created a 10-week program that you can do on your own that involves 2 continuous breathing sessions a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening, and an affirmation dealing with emotional imprints. The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Michael Singer believes that everything happens in the heart. And so Michael Singer talks about whenever you become frightened, jealous, angry, go immediately to the heart and relax and release. Relax and release. Wonderful, wonderful book. The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle also wrote The Power of Now. The reason that I have chosen The New Earth is because he has a rather lengthy section on the pain body and talking about non-resistance in relation to the pain body. And he even says, for the pain body to dissipate, you need to love it to death. And then Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukov. Gary, former Green Beret, introduced me to the concept of coming to Earth School and signing on to learn certain lessons. When I read that book, I said, what was I thinking when I signed on for this? But at any rate, I did. And the iChill app is by the Trauma Institute, and you can put that on your phone, and it will go into all of the tools in resiliency. There's other tools, there's gesturing, there's shifting and staying, there's tracking, and it's a wonderful app. You also have my email, and if you would like to communicate with me, if you have any other questions or comments. Also, I live in upstate South Carolina, about an hour from Greenville, South Carolina, about an hour and a half from Asheville, North Carolina. And in the spring, summer, and fall, I'm going to be hosting workshops for women on our property in the woods, where there'll be plenty of space for social distancing. And I'm going to be conducting workshops for women. And then you have my novel, Going to Empty, which is on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. And it is an engaging story, very relevant, of course, to our topic today. I would call it faction, some fact, some fiction, blended together. And I would just, again, like to thank you so much. And I will stop sharing and I will go into the chat to see if any of you have any questions or comments for me today. And let's see, here we go. Okay. All right, let me just scroll up here. And okay, there's a link for my book. Thank you so much for putting the link in. Cindy Connor said, love the book. Thank you, Cindy. Sue said she loved the book as well. And Navanjali highly recommended reading it. From Louise, what if someone got a promotion that you think you deserve? I have to look at this person each day and it's hard to think they have my job. Well, what I would say to you, Louise, is you can utilize some of the tools that I've shared. I think one of the things about comparing ourselves to other people and coming up short means that we have not totally tapped in to our own goodness and worth. And jealousy is fearing what someone is going to take from you, and envy is wishing that you had what someone else has. So I would just encourage you to allow the feeling and work with it, and also know your worth. And let's see, what if multiple people have cheated on you in your life? I get jealous and suspicious because of past poor choices. Is the issue more jealousy or trust? If someone has cheated on you, Denise, then that's what I call a valid reason for jealousy. The kind of jealousy that I have been discussing is based on my own sense of myself and not knowing my own worth, and therefore other people that I compared myself to became threatening. But if someone has cheated on you, then certainly that's a valid reason. But when you embark on new relationships, what you're going to want to do is be able to have worked with your mistrust so you can enter into a relationship and not think that the current person is going to behave exactly as the last, because you will set yourself up. And let's see, the third step of integration, do you mean kind of feeling the emotions of jealousy and not avoiding them? Yes, Chelsea, that's exactly what I mean. And Joyce says, when will the movie come out? Dies the star. Oh, thank you so much, Joyce. And let's see, happy birthday to your beloved mother. May God bless you all. Thank you, Madam X, Y, and Z. And we have Di's book, Going to Empty. And then from Vivian, are you a life coach? No, I am not a life coach. And that looks like all of the questions in the chat. And I just really want to thank you. And it's delightful to see my daughter, Gwen. And luckily, Gwen doesn't have these issues. I have not passed on the generational curse. And it's delightful to be raising a daughter like Gwen, who has beautiful, strong sense of herself. And it's just lovely to observe her in her life. She has so many friends. She has a tribe of beautiful women, and she embraces them all. And it just makes me feel so proud. And Paul Connors, I liked your book too. Wondering, is jealousy ever the right emotion or positive in some way? Usually emotions serve some purpose. Yes, happy birthday to your mom. What I would say, Paul, is in my case, I would call jealousy the right emotion because it was an awakening for me. I, grew up in a situation that created that sort of suspicion and insecurity, but it wasn't until that manifested in jealousy that I knew that I had work to do, which really allowed me to get on a spiritual path that has served me, and I believe served many of those that I come in contact with. And I do believe that emotions serve a purpose. Yes, they do. And here is from my wonderful daughter, all due to a wonderful mother who taught me how to communicate and open to others. Great job with the technology, Mom. Thank you, Gwen. Well, everyone, I just want to again say, okay, one more chat. How do we help female adolescents to empower their girlfriends instead of trying to be like them? I think, Viviana, what you need to do, and I know you're in a role to be an incredible model for female students. And I think the most important thing you can do for female students is to get them to understand what their goodness is, what their strength is. Really, each of us has an individual purpose and gift here. And if we're always comparing ourselves and coming up short, we're never actually going to make our true contribution. So it's really encouraging people to be themselves and to be at home in themselves and to cherish and respect who they are. And let's see, what if you're jealous about how much attention you're giving a friend and then not getting much back? Almost makes me feel like taking a step back from her. Well, again, I am a firm believer in honesty in terms of creating connection and intimacy with folks. And so I think that's a discussion worth having with your friend, Chelsea. Well, Viviana, wonderful. We'll continue to advise them to be happy with who they are. Yes, and Viviana was a student of mine at St. Andrews many years ago, and what an amazing woman she has turned out to be. Okay. Well, thanks again, everyone, for being here with me today.